Hello, welcome to Good Morning Transfers. There are 23 days remaining in the summer transfer window, and yes, Harry Kane is still a Tottenham player. But with the Premier League season almost here, is time running out for Bayern to get a deal done? The latest is on the way. Also this hour, we'll have news from West Ham. Could one of their key players from last season be on the move? And we'll be joined by former Manchester United coach Rennie Mullenstein, all in the company of Dan Bardell, Nabeed Haroun and Zach Jalab. Right, a very good morning to everyone watching at home and those watching on the Premier League YouTube channel. Right, let's get straight into it. We understand that Bayern Munich and Tottenham continued negotiations overnight for England captain Harry Kane. And in recent days, Kane has been leading towards staying at Tottenham this season after the German champions angered Daniel Levy with an ultimatum over their final £86 million offer last weekend. We're asking on Twitter, by the way, is Kane the best striker in the world right now? Hashtag transfer talk to get in touch. I'll be asking the panel that question later on. But, Zach, straight away, why do Bayern need to show so much urgency right now with 3 weeks left in the window?
Well, supposedly Kane has told everybody that he wants the decision made on his future by the start of the Premier League, which for Spurs is obviously this Sunday away to Brentford. Now, Bayern season as well also starts this weekend in the Super Cup against RB Leipzig, and I'm sure they'd want to have their squad settled for when the season starts as well. Now, look, their forwards can be improved on massively. They've still got a guy called Tell who's exceptionally young, Eric Choupo-Moting, and Gnabry who can play in that front nine position. However, Gnabry isn't really a number 9, and obviously Choupo-Moting is now 34 years old. They've got to be looking towards getting a new striker in. Ever since they lost Lewandowski, Harry Kane's that perfect person to come in and fill that slot for them. And look, when you get someone like Harry Kane in there, the guy can do it all. He can score goals, but also, compared to all of these guys, he can creatively make goals too.
Dan, we know that Harry Kane is actually working under Antoine Postecoglou and enjoying it, all right? And he's saying that if this move isn't sorted by the start of the season, he wants to stay. Is there hope for Tottenham now?
I don't think there's hope that he'll sign a new contract this summer. I think from what we've heard, that's not going to be a possibility. But I do think the longer it goes on, if Spurs can formulate a good start under Postecoglou, and the vibes coming out at the moment are that Kane is enjoying himself, as you've just said, if they can get off to that good start and show that they're heading in the right direction and that potentially they may challenge for trophies in the future. We know that the top 5, depending on the coefficient, potentially can qualify for the Champions League this season. I do wonder if the longer it goes on, if Kane's still in the building, whether Spurs just think maybe they can persuade him to sign a new contract the longer time goes on. If it gets to January, obviously, then it will be difficult because Kane can talk to every club abroad, and then he's got 6 months until he can talk to any Premier League club. At the moment, I would say, because it hasn't been done and it's been rumbling on for so long, every option is still a possibility. But I think Spurs would think they stand a chance the longer he stays there.
Risky, though. It's risky because if they keep hold of Kane and then it runs on until the summer window, they potentially lose one of their greatest ever players, probably their greatest ever player, on a free, and I don't think Daniel Levy will want to see that happen either, which is part of the reason probably why he's really pushing for Kane to leave for 100 million, because Spurs also need the deal to reflect well on them as well.
Do you think Spurs, though, would say, so Spurs fans might argue, if they keep him for a season, they've obviously got a better chance of finishing in those top 5 places. The riches that come from qualifying the Champions League kind of negate the fee. So I'd say they've got no chance of qualifying for the Champions League without Harry Kane. If they keep him, potentially the money that they'd get from qualifying for the Champions League offsets the fee that they wouldn't get. That's
another roll of the dice. It's a gamble on £100 million. And if you don't make the Champions League, you miss out on the 100 million, and then you've lost Kane as well.
So does it make sense then, if this current offer under discussion is £95 million, that's not that far off, does it make sense for Tottenham to accept that now?
I don't think it makes any sense for them to hold out, to be honest. I think they wait until the summer, he goes for free to wherever he wants. They wait until January and hope maybe Bayern might come in and go, here's 60 million, but then you lose your best asset in January when the player's really difficult to replace. So I think at this moment in time, because you've still got the rest of the window to go, you sell him for 100 million and you spend the rest of the window trying to find players that can plug that gap. Or you wait until it gets later and later, and then you never know what could happen.
Ronnie, do hear
from... He wants the 100, doesn't he? Sorry, Tom. Levy clearly wants that number of 100 million. He wants that number, so unless Bayern pay that, Levy's not going to accept it.
Well, is he the best striker in the world right now? Let us know on Twitter, #transfertalk. We will get to that in a moment with the panel. But Zach, let's say he does go. How do Tottenham replace him? This is your first show of the summer. Everyone else has answered this.
Yeah.
You're the only one left.
It's tough because how do you replace the irreplaceable? It's technically impossible, to be quite honest. You're not just replacing somebody who scores close to 30 goals a season in the league alone. You're also replacing arguably their best creative asset as well in Harry Kane, how he links up with so many other players on the pitch, whether it's Heung-min Son or Kulusevski or Richarlison now. Look, I think last season when they brought in Richarlison, it was with the idea of eventually Harry Kane will move on. Whether that is he stays at Spurs and he's obviously into his 30s now, he'll be looking on to maybe end his career in the next 5-6 years or so. They do have someone like Richarlison ready to take that place. And maybe there's a drop-off in form. Or Harry Kane, who has had injuries before in his career, Richarlison can get minutes that way. And so I do think with someone like Richarlison, they've got a decent striker there. But we've not seen proof of Richarlison over the past couple of seasons in the Premier League that he can be a 30-goal Premier League striker. Not many players can do. If you are a £30-goal a season striker, you're going to be worth £100 million at least. And Spurs, obviously, if they sold Harry Kane, they would then maybe have the money to try and go out in the market and get someone of their service or someone like that. I mean, maybe they could look towards kind of distributing it around the pitch and going and get several players who can, instead of chipping into 30 goals, maybe they get 10. 3 players that can get 10 and also help out creatively. There's a lot of questions. I wouldn't want to be the guy making the decision for Spurs.
I don't think exactly answer that question at all, Age.
No, you haven't.
It's tough because I basically don't think they can. I don't think they can replace him. Yeah. Really, I think it's impossible to replace him. And the best thing they can do is essentially kind of get a bunch of players to all chip in towards the efforts of doing it.
Let's say this does go through at this stage, Dan. £95 million. Kane goes to Bayern. Bayern get who they want. Tottenham at least gets some money with 1 year, a lot of money with 1 year left on the player's contract. Does everybody win if that's the case? I can't see a loser there.
You could make an argument that everyone takes some kind of victory from that. I think Bayern would be the biggest winners. OK, they've had to pay an awful lot of money to get someone who they could get for a free in 12 months' time. But in 12 months' time, there's no guarantee that Harry Kane will pick Bayern when he'd have a host of options, an array of options. So Bayern, I mean, Zach listed them at the start of the show. Their striking options are thin. They tried to operate without a proper striker last season with Sadio Mane leading the line, and it did not work. The Bayern fans would not want to go into the season with Gnabry probably being their false nine. They want a proper striker. It's a little bit of an insight into how difficult it will be for Spurs to replace Harry Kane, because look at how it's taken Bayern a year to get to this point with Lewandowski replacing him, and they've still not replaced him now, and they still might not. I do wonder, actually, on a different subject, not answering the question again, where would Bayern go if they don't get Harry Kane now, because they have put all their eggs in this basket? I wonder where they would look.
I think Bayern do look at their youngster in Tell and think he has a huge future there. That he's somebody they've had for a little while now and believe that he can eventually be the guy that leads that line. But that's a lot of pressure to put on someone so young to go and lead the line for Bayern Munich. You know, a club that is battling at the top ends of every competition, whether that's in Europe or their own division. I guess they do still have the likes of Thomas Müller as well, who obviously has an experienced head on his shoulders, but obviously playing through the middle as a number 9 isn't exactly his perfect position. What they do have, though, is a manager in Thomas Tuchel who likes to tinker and can kind of play with certain players and play them out of position or do things with the formation to kind of make things work. But I think, as you said, last season they kind of did that, and in the end they just got it over the line by winning the league.
The problem is there's a lot of clubs out there that need strikers at the moment. So if Bayern don't sign Kane, then they're back in this market competing with everyone else. Because at the moment, it feels like they've got a free run at Harry Kane. Also, if Spurs lose Kane now, Premier League season starts for them on Sunday, they don't have a lot of time to spend that 100 million, which is why I would, back to your question, say if there is a loser, it's probably Spurs in this. Yes, they get the money, but they only have a very limited amount of time to replace Kane.
And everyone then knows they've got 100 million to spend as well. So the price then increases on whatever player they go in for, whatever striker they go in for. You add an extra 10%, an extra 15% because you know they've got the money there. It's not a tough gig.
Well, one striker has left the Premier League for Germany, because Burnley have confirmed that Wout Weghorst has joined Bundesliga side Hoffenheim. It's a season-long loan. He had loan spells last season, remember, with Besiktas the first half of last season, and then Manchester United for the second half of the season. He returned to Turf Moor this summer, and he'll spend the upcoming season with Hoffenheim and Burnley say that they wish him the best for next season out in Germany. So Wout Weghorst on loan to Hoffenheim from Burnley. Now to West Ham. We understand that Lucas Paqueta is one of the midfielders that Manchester City are interested in signing this summer. However, the player is not for sale. He's got 4 years left in his West Ham contract, and he cost £51 million from Lyon only last year. However, if Manchester City were to make a bid, we understand the player would be open to joining the club. OK, so why a midfielder, Nabeed, for Manchester City? Paqueta, we are told, is one of the midfielders they're considering.
Well, they've lost Ilkay Gundogan, and I think he's a player that Manchester you could always rely on. He had that unpredictability, the ability to play in multiple positions. Paqueta has played as a 10, he's also played as an 8, he's played as a 6 as well. And I think if you think about a player that Pep could really mould into something that he wants, I feel like Paqueta is exactly that sort of player. He's got all the technical attributes. He's brilliant in possession. He's press resistant. He's also good at pressing. And then I was actually pleasantly surprised that when he went to West Ham last season, I had a feeling that they'd struggled to find a home for him. And actually, I think he actually just said, you know what, I'm one of the best players in this team. I'll make my own position in this side. So if City do manage to get Paqueta, it's another absolutely unbelievable midfielder.
It really would. It'd be very impressive. I think it also then allows as well, right? They've brought in someone like Mateo Kovacic who can kind of play a little bit deeper if they need him to, and allow Paqueta to kind of play that 8 role. It's not a shock that he would be willing to join Manchester City either, right? If you're one of these players who enjoy being part of a technical team, the idea of playing and linking up with Man City and being managed by Pep Guardiola is very, very exciting to you. It's not a shock at all. I think the one thing is when West Ham say they don't want to sell, they very often don't sell. We saw that over the last couple of years with Declan Rice when West Ham went, we're not selling him this year, we're not selling him this summer, and in the end it never happened. And when they do sell, they go, it's for this price and this price only. They still got over £100 million for Declan Rice. It wouldn't shock me if they try and push the price to go up as well if they were after someone like that.
Because West Ham, they have already lost Rice. I mean, losing Paquetá as well when they're already light in midfield. You've got to say, from West Ham's point of view, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, he's the natural succession plan in terms of a fan's favourite at West Ham, I would say. He didn't really flourish last season, especially at the beginning phase when he was there, but I think it was just finding the right kind of position for him. I actually saw him play deep a couple of times for West Ham and thought he was way more involved in the game, and I thought West Ham looked a better team when he played deeper rather than trying to play him as that number 10. Obviously, he's a player that would flourish under Pep, but West Ham would not want to lose another star man at this point of the season. One thing I would say is that we spoke a lot about Bernardo Silva yesterday. I don't see this as being a replacement for him. I think Paquetá would operate in the central areas, and I think this would just secure that Man City then wouldn't need to buy someone to play on the right-hand side. I think it would just mean Bernardo Silva would play most of his football from there and probably sign a new contract. The
problem really is for West Ham here is because they just sold Rice for $100+ million. Paqueta, I think, was bought for $51 million, including add-ons and all that stuff. If they actually want to sell him, they probably can't get $100+ million because they sold Rice for that amount. But they'll want 80, 90 million. Do Manchester City want to spend 80, 90 million? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, their stance is very much that Paquetá is not for sale. Right, still loads to come on Good Morning Transfers as Arsenal get closer to signing David Raya from Brentford. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Arsenal have been very active in the market this summer. They're now close to finalising a deal to sign the Brentford goalkeeper, David Raya, for around £30 million. Let's get some reaction to that and speak to Arsenal fan Albert Yumo. Albert, great to see you. Good morning to you. This David Raya deal, do you think this is a good move? Is Arteta just increasing competition in another key position?
Yeah, Tom, good morning to you, mate. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic move personally. It kind of caught myself and probably Arsenal fans a bit left field in terms of, they've gone for a goalkeeper. But if you actually take a step back and look at it, we've been linked with David Raya before, back in 2019. There's obviously a link with Inaki Kana, the goalkeeping coach at Arsenal, who had a hand in bringing Raya from Blackburn to Brentford. And the link has never gone away. If you look at the stats in regards to Ramsdale and David Raya, they're quite similar in terms of goals conceded and clean sheets, but in terms of David Raya, is a standout in terms of long touches and long passes completed, where he ranked first in the Premier League last season. So I think that's quite instrumental in the way that Arteta wants to play, and I can see the logic behind the signing, even though some Arsenal fans still grumble a little bit, but we like to moan a little bit, Tom.
Football fans in general, Albert, we know that very much. In terms of what you've done so far, I mean, Declan Rice, massive. Kai Havertz as well from Chelsea. Jurriën Timber, who I think Arsenal wanted for quite some time. How happy are you with that so far?
I'm very happy. I think the key thing with Arsenal is addressing the key areas that need to be addressed. Essentially, we've done that with Declan, renamed Declan Jollof Rice. We've got Jurriën Timber in. Kai Havertz, as you mentioned. Kai Havertz is interesting because a lot of Arsenal fans actually really wanted him before he joined Chelsea, but it didn't work out for him there, but he's got a clean slate. Mikel Arteta's obviously seen something in him. And Tom, with Kai Havertz quickly, I think he gives us a different dimension in terms of, if you are going to play him at the focal point as a false number 9 or a main number 9, we can get the ball from back to front a lot quicker, and we can go for a more direct route. But Declan Rice in particular as well, quickly, an excellent signing. I think with him, Arsenal fans should be really buoyed, because this is not a player that has played in Serie A or Liga and we wasn't aware of him. He's been in our eye line for the last 3 or 4 years. He can play in the 6 and the 8. I think he ranked first in Premier League last season for interceptions and possessions, and that is a skill set in its own. It's gone from the days of, we used to have the Claude Makelele's and the water carrying Didier Deschamps, and now you've got the likes of Casemiro's and the Rodris and Declan Rice. He's been an amazing addition, Tom, personally, for me.
Yeah, and you'll be hoping that this business by the end of the window gets you closer to, if not even overtaking, Manchester City, who you beat in the Community Shield, of course. Now it appears that the focus might be on outgoings. Are there some obvious areas where you could offload some players who might be surplus to requirements now for Arteta?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. I think what Arsenal need to get better at, and it's still a work in progress, is we need to recuperate better money for players that do leave the club. I do think we got quite a bit of decent money for Granit Xhaka that we did get, because when he was linked to leaving Arsenal before, the fee was a lot lower. We got a little bit of money for Austin Trusty going to Sheffield United, and obviously Matt Turner's going to Nottingham Forest. I think that's for about 10 million fee. And obviously the talk about Balogun potentially leaving, which would be, I can see Arsenal cashing in. There's still time to tell. It looks like he might move on. But I think in terms of, you mentioned about the Man City aspect of it, I think that win on Sunday was huge for a number of different reasons, Tom. We haven't beaten City for a long, long time. We forgot what it's like to beat them. It's been since 2019. And I think it was psychological of Arsenal. And it just gives the players a bit more confidence to show that they can actually beat Manchester City. Yes, you can go toe-to-toe for them in the league and try and get it done, which is difficult because you've got to hit that 90-point mark and above. But I think psychologically that was massive for Arsenal to get that win on Sunday.
Albert, great to see you today. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, Tom.
I've got some big developments from West Ham, actually. This one, I was going to say it's moving quite quickly, but in fairness, it's actually not moving at all, and I'll explain what I mean there. They've received an initial approach from Manchester City for midfielder Lucas Paquetá. Now, we are told that the proposal was in no way deemed acceptable. It's thought that West Ham will not even begin to consider selling him for less than £85 million. So if this has been in no way acceptable. It's obviously considerably less than £85 million, this bid. However, it's understood that Paqueta's head has been turned by Manchester City's interest, which we were talking about with the panel before the break, actually. One other bit of news from West Ham, though, they are now close to an agreement with Manchester United to sign centre-back Harry Maguire. Right, so an offer from Manchester City for Lucas Paquetá? No, not even close. They want at least £85 million, but they are close to signing Harry Maguire from Manchester United. Let's go back to Paquetá then, Zach. It sounds like the asking price is £85 million.
Yeah.
Now, as someone who cost £51 million, was at the World Cup with Brazil, wasn't he, as well? You know, Brazil international, and a very good season. 51 million up to 85. Quite fair?
It's a nice little profit. It's a nice little profit.
Is it fair? I don't think, are they asking too much?
I don't think they were asking too much. I don't. When you spend that amount of money on a player like himself, you do want to go and get profit on him if you're going to sell, especially at this point in the window. The season starts this weekend, right? It's not like this happened a couple of months ago and they've been able to plan about how they're going to replace him. They would have to come up with a contingency plan very, very quickly and spend that money elsewhere to try and get a replacement for him. And so all these kind of factors come into it about when you make these decisions on, OK, because it's so close to the season starting, because there's only now, you know, we're into the last month of the transfer window, then these decisions have to be thought about how much more money it might cost then to get him off of your hands. Look, West Ham fans, I think, would be gutted in losing him. I really do. And after losing Declan Rice, then losing Paqueta, like, it could be, for their midfield, really, really poor, because I think, obviously, after Declan Rice, we mentioned it earlier, that he is the contingency plan. He is now the fan favourite. And so, yeah, we'll see. But I think right now, for Man City to go and reach that price, it's a lot of money for them to pay.
Right, so
for West Ham fans, like they've spent all summer waiting to sign players. They've lost their best player. Suddenly, just as it looks like they're about to get bodies through the door, they could be losing another star man. So West Ham fans must be beside themselves at the moment. 4
years left on his contract, though. West Ham hold the power in this situation. Right, coming up next, we'll be speaking live to former Manchester United coach and Fulham manager, Rennie Mullenstein. Welcome back. This is Good Morning Transfers. We are delighted to welcome former Manchester United assistant coach René Meulensteen to the show. René, great to have you with us. Now, we know you've got a new book being released, and it's called United, Sir Alex and Me. How much did you enjoy putting some wonderful memories down on paper?
It was actually really enjoyable, Tom. It's been quite a while in the making. It took me about 2 years in total. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and to relive all those memories and moments, it's actually a great project.
And the book goes behind the scenes during, well, it was the most successful time in Manchester United's history, in most clubs' history, really. Talk us through your time at the club and moments that really stood out.
Yeah, I came to Manchester United in 2001 as a skills development coach, which I tried to implement the sort of skills development program at grassroots level. So there was a lot of young kids that I saw coming through the door, including somebody like Marcus Rashford and Scott McTominay and many others. And then I sort of progressed and started to take the reserve team, which included Gerard Piqué, Johnny Evans, Giuseppe Rossi, which gave me an opportunity to implement that skills development program into a team setting. And then after my short spell at Brøndby, I got the opportunity to come back to United, firstly as the technical coach, which gave me the opportunity to work with a lot of individual players, on certain aspects of their game. And then when Carlos Queiroz left, the manager promoted me to first team coach. And that was the start of that 6-year spell working with Sir Alex Ferguson. And it was an absolute joy.
And this is the thing, you've been there with Sir Alex for so long. And in the book, you break down how to build a winning team. And you make it seem so easy and so obvious in your book. But how long did it take to achieve all of that and instill that winning mentality throughout the whole club, not just the first team?
Yeah, well, obviously, Tom, when I came to Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson had already built that winning team. For me, it was if you sort of categorise things and you break things down, it makes it easier to understand. For us, when I came in, it was more a matter of maintaining it. To build a winning team, we all know when Sir Alex Ferguson started in '86, it took him about 5 to 6 years, before he won the first Premier League title, and then he carried on from there. So it obviously can take a while. I always say for every manager to come into a club, it will take about 18 months, give and take, for him to put his stamp on the team and the squad and the way and the style that he wants to play. But to making sure that you can look at it and break things down makes it much easier to understand, because you can then affect every aspect of the club that has an influence of being successful or not.
And tell us about your relationship. How good was it with Sir Alex? It must have been good if you were there with him for that long, and he was clearly your boss, clearly a good boss, and you get on very well to this day, I believe.
No, absolutely, and I enjoyed every minute of it, Tom. And if you look back at the club as Manchester United, who have, the biggest and highest ambitions to win, and challenge for every title possible, with that comes expectations and with that comes pressure. But the strange thing is, I never felt any kind of negative pressure working with and for Sir Alex, and that was purely due to his man management skills. He trusted us, he delegated a lot to us, to McPhelan, myself, Eric Steele, Tony Strudwick, and we had a sort of a really tight-knit, group that sort of ran the daily running of the club. So it was an absolutely fantastic time in my coaching career.
How did it come about that he actually appointed you in the first place?
Well, I was working as a coach and a manager in Qatar at the time with Al Sadd, but previously, in previous years, I'd done a lot of coaching courses with the FA. And I got to know Dave Richardson, and who got to know me and about my philosophy and my methods of coaching, and especially the skill development program. And Dave felt that it was the right thing really to bring that into England. And he's tried to open the doors to different clubs, but nothing really materialised until Les Kershaw, the academy manager at Manchester United at that time, knocked on Dave's door and said, listen, we are looking for a technical coach. We can't really find anybody in England. Have you got a recommendation? And Dave said, yes, I do. He's not English. It's a Dutch guy who works in Qatar, and he's very well, led in with the curve and method. And conversations came from that, and eventually I got the chance to go over to Manchester United, You know, and to me, Sir Alex, I have to say one person played a very important role as well, apart from Dave Richardson and Les Gersha, was Dave Mackay, the legendary Scottish player, who I got to know in Qatar. I worked with him, and he rang Sir Alex and said, listen, I know you're looking at this coach and I can really recommend him taking him. So that is how it came about.
Oh, fantastic. A Dutch coach who's good technically. I mean, never heard that before, just joking, of course. But later in the book, you go into detail about coaching the elite. You've coached Wayne Rooney, Rio Ferdinand, Cristiano Ronaldo, loads more great players that you've worked with. What's it like seeing them become the players that they did? Because legends at various clubs, and some of them, well, Ronaldo, still playing right now.
No, absolutely, it's fantastic to see. And you know what it is with that, the players of that calibre. You know, the biggest mistake any coach can make to say to themselves, listen, you know, how do you improve them? You know, is there still something they can learn? And I think the most important approach that I've always used was never ever use the word change in coaching, because change creates resistance. Players will ask themselves, well, what am I doing wrong? But I always use the word add. So if I was coaching, whether it was Wayne or Rio or anybody else, I would always say, listen, when I look at your game, I really think we can add this to your game, which makes you more complete, maybe more effective, or maybe more productive. And that helped them along all the way. And then to see, you know, those performances turning into results and turning into winning trophies in all their, you know, for Man United and also the personal careers is just fantastic to see.
You also talk about your time as a Premier League manager in charge of Fulham, and I know that when you got the job, you didn't actually go to Fulham to be manager, did you? Which was interesting enough. But also, I remember when you left Fulham, I remember it was me who came on set when Fulham announced that Felix Magath was going to be the new manager. I remember sitting down in the studio, in the break, about to start the show, and the producer said, Tom, we start with breaking news from Fulham. Felix Magath is the new Fulham manager. I remember saying to the producer in this break, oh, so have they sacked René Meulensteen? And the producer said, there is no mention of René Meulensteen in this statement from Fulham. And I remember being absolutely baffled by, hold on, they've appointed a manager and haven't mentioned the fact that, you know, they already had one in René Meulensteen. How difficult was that time at Fulham?
Well, very. And I was baffled as well, Tom, to be honest, to be fairly honest. But football is a small world, and you know, you got contacts everywhere. And it was really a friend of mine in Germany that has already sort of spotted, you know, Felix Magath talking to, you know, some representatives of Fulham. So I had a little bit of an inkling what was going on. I don't think they put me in a statement because they were hoping to retain me in some other capacity at the club. But I didn't feel it was right. Like you said in the beginning, I never really came to become the manager. I wanted to help Martin Jol. You know, to get the best possible season in Fulham. I was happy to stay in the Premier League. It's a fantastic club, Fulham, and even it was a short time. I had an absolute great time there. It's just really, I felt the time that they sort of brought in Felix Magath and let me go was a little bit of bitterness there, because I really felt we were turning the ship, and I think everybody in the club felt that. We had a few decent results and at least decent performances, and the sort of new players that are brought in, you know, starting to click. And I always look back to the 12 or 13 games I was in charge in the Premier League. There was about 9 at that time that were in the top 10. So the better games were just around the corner, but unfortunately it wasn't to be.
Yeah, it was a strange decision. Of course, Fulham ended up going down after that as well. Now, this is the transfer show. I want to talk transfers with you, because when Manchester United signed Robin van Persie, funny enough, I was on air when that happened as well, when they signed him from Arsenal. But what was your involvement in that? How did it come about?
Well, I got a phone call from his agent, which I knew. And he basically said, listen, Robin's contract talks at Arsenal have stalled a little bit because he's not too happy of sort of the plans forward, and I don't think he's going to re-sign, and he loves to stay in the Premier League. He loves to basically play for Man United, but he really wants to play for Sir Alex Ferguson. Do you think there would be an interest? And I said, well, the only thing I can do is ask Sir Alex and what he thinks. So, which I did. I walked into the office and I said, Sir Alex, this is the phone call I had. What do you think? And obviously the strategy at the time was that we were mainly signing players 23 or younger, just to making sure that we had an upside to those players bringing in. Robin was obviously a bit older in that respect, but it took a little bit of while to sort of, let that idea sink in. But I think the more and more Sir Alex thought about it, had discussion with David Gill about it, the more and more they started to sort of realise it could actually be a really good move, because we all felt we needed to bring somebody in with a bit of a wow factor, also for the senior players, that they knew we are really bringing somebody in that is going to help us to win that the next title.
Yeah, I think you might have got that one right, Rene, with Robin van Persie. And Erik ten Hag, this summer he's brought in Andre Onana, Mason Mount, Rasmus Højlund. You're probably quite happy that Johnny Evans is back there as well, actually, because I'm sure you will have worked with him. But how close do you think Manchester United can be to challenging with this signings that they've got in?
Difficult to say from this moment on, Tom, because obviously I think the signings are good. Obviously Erik knows Onana from Ajax. He plays there, very charismatic goalkeeper. Good goalkeeper, good with his feet, playing out from the back. That is something that Erik wants. I think the key for him is as well as to have that stability in the back line with Varane and Martinez, where Varane is still a little bit injury prone. At times you have to look at that. Mason Mount, I think, is a player that brings that already that experience that he had playing in the Premier League in a top team, but also with the eye for the future, because obviously Eriksen is getting on a bit, and so does Casemiro. And then Højlund, which unfortunately is injured at the time. You won't see him in the beginning of the league, and still will take a little bit of time to settle. But the sort of three good signings. But to say, listen, will they be able to straight away challenge? That's why I think Erik is managing the sort of expectations really well. He wants to, because that is his end game, 100%. He wants to make sure that he gets the team and a squad ready to challenge for the title again, and that is what Manchester United should be about anyway.
Manchester United have always been so good at bringing players through the youth system, which you have been part of, and I think you mentioned Scott McTominay early on. He's wanted by other clubs, in particular West Ham. How hard is it to see a player who has come through the ranks eventually leave the club? Not saying that he will, by the way, but he is wanted by West Ham. How hard is it to see them go?
It is always difficult, because those young boys that you've seen coming through the door of the age of 6, 7, 8 or 9, and they just bleed Manchester United. I can still remember when Danny Welbeck left the club, and I scratch my head and I think to myself, these boys they have got that extra sort of intrinsic motivation, because Manchester United is everything. It's under their skin, and it won't be any different with Scott McTominay. So yeah, if he does leave, it would be a shame.
And Rene, well, just a couple more questions while we've got you. Our top story for most of this summer has been on Harry Kane, with a year left on his Tottenham contract. Bayern Munich very keen on signing him. Would that be a good move for him, or in his shoes, would you wait until next summer and see what happens at Tottenham, potentially go for free?
Well, for Harry, I think it's a good move. I mean, you can question the fact, is he staying? Is that a good move? See, Harry will always score goals. If he stays with Tottenham Hotspur, and he will get the same delivery as he get with the right players around him, which Tottenham does have in Song and Kulusevski and all of them, he will again score 20, 25 plus goals. But going to Bayern Munich is a different kind of challenge for him, to go abroad and play in a different league, play in the Champions League, which Bayern Munich will have a great chance and do well in both those competitions, and obviously the domestic cup competitions. He will score 25 to 30 plus goals for Bayern Munich if he would go there. And that is, I think, a purely personal decision from Harry to say, okay, what is it what I want in the latter stages of my career? Do I really want to have an adventure abroad with a club with the likes of Bayern Munich, who's a massive club, and have a chance of winning big trophies? Or do I stay, and challenge that, Alan Shearer record, in the Premier League, and keep going and hopefully be building a new Tottenham Hotspur under Ange Postecoglou, and maybe win some domestic trophies here. So it's a little bit to say what is the right answer. Is it staying or is it going? But I can understand both motivations if he would go to Bayern or if he would stay.
And how hard is it in a dressing room when your key player, whether they want to leave or not, when there's a question mark over their future, how difficult is that dressing room from a coaching perspective?
Well, you have to be. People know what's going in the background. There's no hiding place. nowadays in the media and through social media, so people know and they're aware of it. But I think most professional players, they will understand the situation. They will not really, I think, make too much out of it. They have to concentrate on their own, pre-season and making sure that they are ready, and the manager has to do the same. Is it easy? And does it help the cause? No, not really, because as a manager you want clarity. Because if Harry Kane does go, then Ange has obviously a void to fill, with another player that is already in the squad, or maybe bring somebody in, and that's the discussion. Even if they're going to pay 94+ million for Harry, who can they bring in, and on the short term to replace him?
Well, United, Sir Alex and me by Rennie Mullenstein goes on sale tomorrow. Rennie, we've really enjoyed your company this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's loads more to get through. A reminder of the big transfer news today. West Ham have rejected Manchester City's approach for Lucas Paquetá. They won't sell for less than £85 million. Just days before the start of the Premier League season, Wolves are looking for a new manager. Julian Lopetegui has left the club after being frustrated with their transfer business. We understand that Gary O'Neill is the #1 choice to fill that role. Dan, just remind us how we've got to this.
Yeah, I think the Wolves fans will be asking themselves the same question. Obviously, Lopetegui came in last year and kept them up, did well to keep their heads above water. Lopetegui had been a long-term target of the Wolves hierarchy. He was their preferred choice in 2016, and eventually last season they managed to get him in. But it's felt like this walkout or resignation was inevitable all summer. Wolves haven't been as active in the transfer market in terms of incomings as Lopetegui would like. Obviously a fair few outgoings, which we'll discuss later. And it's just kind of led to this impasse, really. And as always with these things, it's the fans that are the losers, because Wolves have now lost a very good manager right on the eve of the season and will be scrambling around to replace him.
Well, if it's to do with transfer business, let's have a look at what they've done so far this summer in terms of who they've brought in and who have gone. So in terms of players they've signed, there's £9.5 million there for Traore. The others there, Matt Doherty's come back on a free, and young Tom King as well on a free. In terms of the outs, we've had to go for a selected out because so many players have left. Some have gone for free who were on big wages, like you can see Diego Costa and João Moutinho have gone for a free, but they've got £47 million there for Ruben Neves, 23 for Nathan Collins, Cody's wages as well as some money coming in, and same with Raul Jimenez as well. That's just selected departures, by the way. But Nabate, what does that tell you, that there's seems to be no money to spend, but they brought all that in and cut the wage bill?
Well, they've got an FFP issue, which we'll definitely discuss, but I think the problem they've got is not only have they lost players, they've lost really key players and not been able to replace them. And I think it's quite telling when they signed Diego Costa, because at that time they were desperate for a striker, they needed goals, and actually the rest of Europe wasn't interested in Diego Costa. He had his best years at Chelsea and actually has been on a really big decline since then. And they went for him as their fix as a striker. And he struggled when he came in. And then they've also signed Matheus Cunha, who is very expensive. I think ultimately they've ended up in a situation where they've lost their best assets, their best players, and tried to replace them with whoever they can scramble to get hold of.
Yeah, we're going to talk much more on Wolves in Transfer Talk at midday, by the way. We've got to move back to West Ham, though, because so much has gone on at West Ham since we came on air at 9 a.m. with Good Morning Transfers. So Lucas Paquetá, on him, West Ham United, they've received an initial approach from Manchester City for him, but we're told that the proposed offer was in no way deemed acceptable. West Ham will not even begin to consider selling him for less than £85 million. However, and this is crucial, Zach, the player's head has apparently been turned by City's interest.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised when the treble champions come knocking at your door and Pep Guardiola is the one leading those phone calls. I think I'd be interested. I think every single player in the world would be willing to have that kind of phone call, because you are kind of guaranteeing yourself the chance to be fighting at the top of the league, guaranteeing yourself to be going very far in all competitions, and possibly guarantee yourself some trophies as well. And Paqueta can add to that midfield for Man City. Obviously, they went and lost Gundogan. He can kind of be that replacement. I know they went and got Kovacic in, but he can do several roles by playing 6 or slightly further forward. Whereas Paqueta, he can do more of he's more of a like-for-like replacement in Gundogan. Not exactly, and maybe actually slightly more attacking than Gundogan was exactly. But overall, I think for the player and Man City, it would be a great deal. For West Ham, not so much.
Well, we've got some more breaking news from West Ham, actually, because we can tell you now that West Ham have agreed a deal in principle with Manchester United to sign Harry Maguire. It's going to be worth £30 million. We're told, remember, earlier in the hour, we said that this was close, an agreement was close. Now there's an agreement in principle, £30 million. Personal terms, we're told, will not be a problem. There is still some work to do on the details of his exit from Manchester United, but West Ham now cautiously optimistic of completing the signing. I know that, Zach, earlier you were looking at Harry Maguire and you believe that he needs a new start regardless.
Yeah, I think especially with the Euros as well next year too, if you want to be in that England squad, you've got to be playing this season. Last year he barely even got 800 minutes in the Premier League, and his minutes for Manchester United have been going down. And so, yeah, I think him getting a move, getting minutes, being able to kind of regain some form as well is crucial for the rest of his career.
Massive news from West Ham, isn't there? And also just to mention about James Ward-Prowse as well. We thought that they'd given up on James Ward-Prowse. Not the case, actually, because West Ham are growing increasingly confident that they can sign him. That a bid worth £30 million rejected. However, they feel that a breakthrough has been made. So James Ward-Prowse also could be coming into Manchester United alongside Harry Maguire. Much more to discuss later on, but Good Morning Transfers does return tomorrow at 9 a.m. as usual. A Transfer Talk is back at midday today. Loads to get into that we've had to miss out of today's Good Morning Transfers. And at 5 p.m. and 7 p.m, the Transfer Show returns. So loads still to come on Sky Sports News throughout the day. Still to come, though, we've got the latest on Harry Kane, plus we're live to Wolves as they go in search of a new manager.